Bulgarian food courier dies after Zaytoun crash. Rosian Kutayer hands out gifts to voters in Ormi, and Giulia Farrugia Portelli takes Eurovision dig at Julie Zara. All this and more on another episode of Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo. Welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. I am Matt, joined by our editor Julian. Happy International Women's Day to everyone out there. We have a very interesting episode planned for you today. We also have an interview with Malcolm Borg from Għaqda Bdiewa Attivi planned for you later on today. Julian, do you want to kick things off?
Yes, unfortunately today's show is kicking off with some really tragic news. Yanni Kuzmanov has been identified as the food courier who tragically lost his life in Zaytoun on Sunday evening. So today we were told that Kuzmanov, who's only just 38 years old, is the food courier who lost his life in Zaytoun along President Anton Buttigieg on Sunday night. A really tragic story once again involving a food courier. Only just a few weeks ago, Malta shocked, by the news of the death of another food courier in the country. As we all know out there, the working conditions of food couriers aren't too great. And I think the safety of Malta's roads are really starting to feel their effects. We need to sort of really start learning how to respect motorcyclists on the road. I mean, I think we're a bit ignorant to it. When you're in a car and you get a small bumper to bumper, you're fine. You can just call a warden and get going. When it's a motorbike, it can be really, really, really serious.
Condolences to Yanni's friends, family and colleagues. We'll be hearing more about this story, no doubt, within the coming days. Moving on to our next story, Rosian Kutayer is facing serious questions over handing out of gifts to constituents outside a primary school on International Women's Day. Photos sent to us show Kutayer visiting voters and their children outside of San Bastian Primary School, handing them out mugs celebrating women. These mugs in question read "Women Power, I am woman," and also has her name on it. Now, it's important to note that Kutayer has faced criticism in the past over gift giving to constituents. This practice is better known as treating. Kutayer herself was referenced in a Standards Commissioner report on the same subject, mainly because she was caught handing out small bags of oranges back in June of last year to elderly residents of the Smart Care Darpinto home of her hometown in Ormi. Interestingly, people who are found guilty of treating are technically liable to a fine of up to 1,160 euros or an imprisonment of up to 6 months. The law makes it clear that politicians are not allowed to hand out gifts to voters during election season, but interestingly, this law is seemingly never enforced. Malta police have actually told us that they have not received a single report of treating in the last 10 years. So obviously it's not uncommon for politicians, even prominent ones, to carry out treating.
Yes, and for anyone out there, who sort of sees maybe a mug and sort of sees that, it's really nothing, people need to really understand how insidious treating can be, right? So Rosian Kutayer has gone in front of a school, a lot of parents, a lot of children celebrating something, that a lot of people can get behind, and immediately that good feeling is attached to Rosian Kutayer. It's only a few weeks ahead of the election, and things like this can really be all the difference between someone getting their seat and somebody not. However, it should absolutely be made clear that Rosian Kutayer is not the only person doing this in the election, and Lovin Malta is informed that there are several prominent politicians and candidates giving out gifts, sometimes way more expensive than a mug to constituents. What's really frustrating about this all is the Standards Commissioner had even flagged treating last year over this whole oranges issue. He said the guidelines really, really clear just 7 months, 8 months before the election, and it seems that his rules are already being broken. On to our next story. This is from one political story to another. We all know it's an election campaign at the moment. Minister for Inclusion and Social Wellbeing, Giulia Farrugia Portelli, has landed herself in hot water after taking a dig at PN candidate Julie Zara for her singing part, which we all know sort of included quite an infamous appearance at the Eurovision, at least for people who are a lot younger than me. she sort of told her, like, during the debate, hey, listen, you know, we are not singing on a stage over here, sort of undermining Julie Zara's attempts to get her point across. Zara immediately defended herself, telling Giulia Farrugia Portelli to not make fun of her story, and by extension, trying to make fun of artists all across the country, as though, you know, they're not really allowed to become politicians. This all happened during a debate on TVM, on the TV1 program Extra. Zara continued to clap back, even though Farrugia Portelli insisted she wasn't, making fun, sort of saying, like, you know, did I mention you being a journalist? No, you know, so make sure that respect extends to everyone. It's quite a funny story, really and truly, because, I mean, just a year or so ago, the Nationalist Party was actually once made to apologise for taking a similar dig at Lynn Faure, who used to be Linker Cop, another Eurovision contestant. After Il Moment said that she was, you know, a failed singer in the article. Adrian Delia had actually contacted Faure himself and publicly apologised to her. You know, I think, you know, what it does tend to prove is, you know, listen, you can be a lawyer, you can be a teacher, you can be a singer, you can be a dancer. That does not preclude you from politics. You know, Ronald Reagan, for example, was an actor. You know, we all look at Zelensky in Ukraine praising him. The guy was a comedian. You know, if you're good at your job and you really care about the people, I think anyone should really be a politician.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you said it very well. Like, just because someone is an artist, I mean, they still have an opinion, they still have some political mindset going about them. So, I don't know, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. You can, in fact, do both things at once if you wanted to. Moving on, speaking of the election, what is the internet telling us about Malta's interest or lack thereof in the election for 2022? Earlier today, we released a two-part series specifically on this subject. Part one covers a lot of other topics, including our comparison to search results in the international sphere, such as the ongoing invasion in the Ukraine. In the second part, we look at how the different parties are comparing between themselves and in comparison to the previous election in 2017. It's interesting to note when it comes to Malta's Google Trends that across the board, there has been a drop in interest compared to the 2017 election. Bernard Grech is showing that he has rising trends in comparison to Prime Minister Robert Abela, despite having a rather slow start. That being said, PL retains an overall larger presence online, but PN are ramping up the effort definitely on their front. It's no secret that PL have a very strong presence online even before the election, but PN has really been putting out posts, social media, you know, sharing, engagement all across the board. Even on TikTok for the younger viewers and the younger voters out there. Let's not forget there are a bunch of 16-year-olds and young voters who will be voting for the very first time. PN has established a TikTok presence, unlike the PL, which doesn't have a formal one, or an official one for that matter, yet, but it'll be definitely interesting to see how that develops. There's a lot more interesting information in both part 1 and part 2, and I highly advise that you go and check it out on lovinmalta.com.
Yeah, no, it was a really interesting read, and it's really, you know, interesting to see how social media and the internet plays such a big part in the election. You know, what I found really interesting from the study itself, you know, is that you know, in comparison to 2017, searches for political parties are really a lot lower. And a big part of that has got to do with the Ukraine crisis, you know. Searches for Ukraine, Russia, Putin and Zelensky dwarf searches for the Labour Party, PN, government, or even Robert Abela and Bernard Grech. It might have a little bit to do why there is this lack of engagement right in the election at the moment. At least that's the feeling I get. You know, people are so focused on Ukraine, maybe they're not paying attention too much at home. Obviously, there are other factors. You know, people I think already know the result, they're not fighting as well. But really, make sure you read these analyses on lovinmalta.com. They're really interesting and a little bit of an insight into the social media landscape. On to our last story. How could we, you know, forget to mention it properly? You know, it's International Women's Day today, and Lovin Malta has put together a video featuring remarkable Maltese women who have truly made an impact throughout the country's history. The video features a poem by renowned Indian-Canadian poet Rupi Kaur, who graciously gave us her blessing to use it. And it's all coupled with an original score by Malta-based Chinese pianist Yun Kai. Women and girls featured throughout the video reciting the poem to Yun's moving and emotional piece. They include Love Malta's very own Sasha Vella and Hailey Borg, the assassinated journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, local TikToker Sarah Falla, child model Francesca Naudi, and many, many more. European Parliament President Roberta Metsola even found time on her really busy schedule at the moment to lend her voice to Kaur's poignant words. It's International Women's Day, a good day to celebrate it, and Lovin Malta has been reporting about it quite extensively today.
You can find the video across all our social media platforms. Please go like and share it. I can say that the team worked really hard on it this year. That brings us to the end of the very first part of today's episode. Stay tuned, we'll now be playing the International Women's Day video for you if you'd like to check it out. And when we're back, we're going to have an interview with Malcolm Borg from Għaqda Bdiewa Attivi. This has been Matt and Julian.
I want to apologize to all the women
I have called pretty. Before I've called them intelligent.
or brave.
I'm sorry.
I made it sound as though
something as simple as what you're born with
is the most you have to be proud of.
when your spirit has crushed mountains. From now on, I will say things like,
You are resilient.
or you are extraordinary,
not because I don't think you're pretty,
but because you are so
Much more than
than that.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Lovin Daily. I'm Julian. Bonnici. Joining me is Malcolm Borg from Għaqda Bdiewa Attivi. That's a group, looking after all of Maltese farmers' interests in the country. Hi Malcolm.
Hello.
All right, thanks a lot for joining us today. I think obviously the topic on everyone's minds at the moment is Ukraine and Russia. As people know, Ukraine is one of the largest exporters in the world, if not the largest exporter of wheat and grain. How is that going to affect, Maltese farmers and Maltese goods in the long run?
Yes, as you said, Ukraine and Russia are considered bread baskets for the world. They produce a lot of wheat, a lot of other cereals, a lot of oils like sunflower oil, and they export a lot of that to various countries. Now, in Malta, we import cereals for two main food supply chains. For the animal feed, okay, in Malta we have two major feed mills that produce animal feed. So they import all the different ingredients from various countries, and then they produce the animal feed over here. And one of the major ingredients is wheat. There's barley. There are different oils that go into this feed. And obviously, they are already indicating that it's a big alarm bell going off, because this is something that's affecting the markets. Also, the flour that we use to produce our bread, okay, is not produced locally, but is imported as wheat and then milled in Malta. That being said, the importer of this wheat said today that this situation in Ukraine is having a huge impact on the market, on the cereals market, which is resulting in various price hikes, especially because the exporting countries are thinking twice before exporting. Why? Because they might be hoarding. Because like any other country, and this should not come as a surprise, like any other country, a country it needs to make sure that it has enough food for its people. And in such turbulent times, one of the major pillars that must keep strong is food supply. So both in Ukraine and Russia, there is this situation arising where they are trying to reduce the export so that they have enough food, make sure that they have enough food for their people, and not only those countries, but also other bordering countries which are receiving refugees, having an increase in populations, and so all this uncertainty, as happened in the beginning of COVID, all this uncertainty tends to have more countries, exporting countries, hoard their products, and obviously someone vulnerable like us, where we have to import most of our food products, 75% of our food products, obviously we're going to be adversely affected quite significantly.
So obviously you spoke about price hikes. I think that's something everyone can expect. And first, what sort of goods do you think are going to see a big increase in prices? And as well on that, is there a possibility that, I don't know, we might see shortages or might be asked to, I don't know, ration, some sort of things?
It's too early to say, Julian, but most definitely anything that has to do with flour. So we're talking bread, we're talking pasta, a lot of confectionaries, a lot of things are made with flour, and also animal products, because animal feed has these cereals in them. Now the Cooperativa Produttori tal-Ħalib in Malta already said that they might absorb the hike, the increase in the price, so that it is not the consumer that has to pay for this price hike, which is good for the consumer, bad for the farmer, because it means that it's going to erode more of their profits. So yes, it's a situation that is evolving. Obviously, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So obviously, a lot of countries have reserves and storages. I don't know personally what's the situation with these reserves and storages, because it can have big impacts in the situation. It's a bit like oil, really and truly. These markets, these cereals is a bit like oil. So it depends on production, depends on storage, it depends on demand. So now we'll see how it evolves. But most definitely, I think that the previous situation where the transport increased the price of many of the food items, this will be compounded now by the situation.
Oh no, that's really interesting. So just as your take from it, so obviously, I mean, now we're in the situation, right? But what lessons can Malta learn, from these shortages? What can we, to prevent these kind of things in the future?
Yes, I mean, this is the third alarm bell in 2 years. So first we had the pandemic, and even the finance ministry said that he was afraid that Malta could end up without food, because there were huge disruptions in the supply chain and in the logistics. So first we had that. Then following these disruptions, we had an increase in transport in the price of containers, which saw, as I referred to earlier, and we had increase in the price of most of our food items, and now we have this. So I think after we're playing with fire, Julian. Okay, we're playing with fire, and this is not a luxury item. This is the most basic item that we have. So I think that something that we must really learn from this is that we need to strengthen our local production and processing. Okay, I'm not saying that we should be self-sufficient, because that's impossible. We never were self-sufficient. That's why we celebrate the Santa Maria convoy during the war, because we're not self-sufficient back then when the population was much less, let alone now. But at least we have to have a food production that can that is resilient enough to buffer for these shocks. So I think that that must really be a priority for the government, and we have to get this straight. I mean, we prioritize healthcare, right, and it's the right thing to do, the education, employment, but this is our food production sector, and we really need this sector to be prioritized, so that these situations, these evolving situations around us, although they would have an effect on us, but at least not to this extent.
Exactly, at least you'll be able to absorb the shock.
Exactly.
To move on a little bit, to do some of the issues facing farmers themselves. So recently we had Alicia Bdiewa Attivi on here. She's a peer candidate who has quite a lot of environmental knowledge. Now, she said one big problem facing farmers at the moment is this intergenerational problem, right? So you have farmers today, but they're not being replaced by future farmers. Even farmers themselves, almost actively discourage their children from doing it. And you can understand why. Sometimes it's hard work. Unfortunately, there's still a stigma around farming, even though it's actually a science and really actually hard to get it right. How do we address this moving forward? You're saying obviously to prevent shock, but we're losing.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it's a huge issue, and not only in Malta, mind you. So this is a situation around the world. We have to make the sector more attractive, and basically we have to make it more financially attractive. Farmers have to earn more money. Okay, there are a lot of other options, a lot of other alternatives, and the sons and daughters of farmers and fishers, when they see these options, they go there. It's more comfortable. They get a better salary. It has less risk in it, and the risk is something that we really have to tackle as a country, because we do not have any insurance or whatever to cover the farmers' assets. So whenever there is like a huge storm or something, the farmers' assets, tens of thousands of investment, can just disappear overnight. So again, so these make it less attractive for the sons and daughters of farmers to enter the sector. But apart from that, it's also very difficult to attract new blood, be it young farmers or old farmers. If we want to attract new blood, we have to remove obstacles that are preventing new blood, new farmers from entering the sector, especially land access. The access to land is a huge issue, the biggest issue in the sector for sure. And I think before we really tackle the access to land and to trust agricultural land in the hands of people that can really produce food for us, we're not going to make this happen. So I'm sure you know about this eviction of farmers, and also agricultural land that is government owned. There's a huge chaos when it comes to the transfer of land or the tendering of land, and so we need to get this right before. We need to make sure that our 10,000 hectares of agricultural land that we have in Malta are in the hands of people who know how to produce food, who have or have the track record or have the will, and so we can start then addressing this, trying to attract new blood, because then it would be worthwhile financially and not financially to enter the sector.
So you just mentioned something quite interesting in the midst of that, about this issue of obviously farmers' insurance and losing crops and whatever. I think probably it's better than most people out there, but Malta at the moment is experiencing some extreme weather. It's either extreme drought and extreme heat, or extreme flooding, which both are detrimental to farmers' livelihood. Is this a massive concern to you, and do you think the government is addressing it?
Yes, it's a huge concern for me and for farmers, and we're expecting more of it because of climate change. Extreme weather events, be it as you said, extreme droughts and heat waves for very long periods of time, flash floods, themselves and all that. So yeah, it is a huge issue. Now, the thing is that we have to have an insurance company that is ready to take the plunge and start covering farmers' assets. As an organization, we have been running after some insurance companies with very little success. I think perhaps it's because it's a high risk. It's a high risk coverage. Also, there is very little data that insurance companies can use to gauge what's in it for them. So I think that every time there's something like this happening, we have always to go to the government, knocking the door, pleading with them to compensate farmers. This is not a sustainable situation. We cannot have this forever, and so we need a long-term solution. And so I really hope that there will be some insurance company in the immediate future that can work with us so that we can find a solution moving forward.
No, that's hopefully. I mean, yeah, it seems really tough, for all of you. Just on that point, obviously we're during an election campaign. Agriculture tends to be featured. What do you think of the proposal so far? At least from my impression, it seems people are just throwing money at the situation without solving it.
Well, yes. So with the Labour Party manifesto, we're waiting on that. We'll see what's in it, because we don't have any visibility of it so far. With the Nationalist Party's manifesto, I think there are some interesting proposals. Very disappointing that the land issue is not featured at all. I expected that something like this, which is, in my opinion, the biggest existential threat to the sector from independence, I expected it to be featured. But otherwise, there are some positive items in the manifesto. I really enjoyed reading the proposals of the environmental NGOs. I think they proposed some very interesting points, and I think that the political parties take them up, especially with the land issue. I think they made some very good proposals, so yeah, I think it's a good mix of proposals. Hopefully, the will is there, and hopefully, by the way, whoever is elected in government will set a ministry for agriculture. We had a Minister for Agriculture for these past 2 years. Before these 2 years, the last time we had a Ministry for Agriculture was, 15, 20 years ago. This fact that we had the Minister for Agriculture really made a difference.
So you felt the change?
Yes, we felt the change. There was more focus, and I think that it really made an impact. So hopefully this is taken up.
Really positive. Just to close things off. So okay, let's say, I don't know, tomorrow hypothetically you became Prime Minister and you're in charge to change policies. What policy, particularly for farmers, are you going to push forward? Most
definitely it's the land reform. We cannot afford to have agricultural land not being used to produce food and to provide a service for the country. So I think it's going to be it's not going to be looked upon very favorably by some sections of the population, but I think that is what the nation needs, a reform of our land legislation to make sure that agricultural land is in the hands of farmers and in the hands of people that really want to produce food for us. And I think that then moving forward, there is a lot of things to be done. There must be a huge drive for food literacy in Malta. We have to make sure, or we have to try to educate people better to understand what they're eating, from where they're eating, and why they're eating what they're eating. Recently there were statistics that I think a third of the Maltese population will be obese by 2030. That's shocking. And I think that food literacy is crucial to tackle something like that. Because if we eat more of what our land and our seas produce, then I think that would make a real difference in the diets and in the consumption patterns of the Maltese.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You've heard it from Malcolm himself. Make sure to start supporting local. There are amazing farmers, fishermen, butchers, all on the island, giving really good goods that are actually really good for you. Thank you, Malcolm, so much for joining us today. Let us know what you think about the interview in the comments below. And remember, have an evening full of loving.